Hello, welcome to CNI Jerusalem Calling. I'm your host today, Allison Weir. I'm the new president of CNI, and I'm also the founder of If Americans Knew. I'm very excited at the guest that we have today, one of the originators of what has turned into an international movement to break the siege of Gaza. An exciting movement consisting of marches, of boats, of people from all over the world of all ages, trying to do what the governments of the world have failed to do, which is stop the illegal starvation of 1.5 million people that live in the Gaza Strip. Our guest will be speaking to us from France, and she is one of a handful of people that had a dream to do this a number of years ago when Israel initiated the siege in which it closed off the Gaza Strip from the rest of the world. I remember when our guest, Greta Berlin, had the dream to get a boat and to just sail to Gaza, not to involve Israel at all, to go through international waters, through the Mediterranean, straight to Gaza, bringing humanitarian supplies. That was a dream. Many people felt it was an impossible one, but Greta and others showed that it was not impossible, as they did indeed succeed through all sorts of dangers that have happened on that initial voyage and ever since. Greta is the mother of 2 grown children. She's been a trainer of engineers for several decades, a very skilled professional woman and activist and a lovely person. So, Greta, are you on the line with us?
I am, Allison. Thank you so much. I often think I'm a myth in my own mind, and the way you've just introduced me, I hope I can live up to your expectations of some of the things we can talk about.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that you are on the line, and I'm excited to have you. What I just said is really an understatement of what you've accomplished. If you could just describe for our listeners when the idea of getting a boat and going to Gaza first occurred, how it happened, and tell us a little bit about the beginning of this movement.
It started about 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago exactly. In fact, when I was waiting for you to call me earlier, I thought 2 years ago today, I got on a plane and flew to Cyprus thinking that we were going to take these 2 boats to Gaza. And, of course, it took us almost a month to get the boats into Cyprus, and we left in August. But we had spent 2 years before then trying to get things organized, and it started with just 5 of us, 3 people out of California and 2 people who were Australian who said, you know, it might be a really good idea if maybe we could sail a boat into Gaza. And we would challenge Israel. We would say, you don't have any right to have this illegal siege. We had no idea. We were so naive. We had no experience buying a boat or maintaining a boat. But we had a tremendous amount of determination and a tremendous amount of passion to try to get the world to understand that Israel had no right to do what I call slow-motion genocide against the Palestinians of Gaza and also against the Palestinians on the West Bank.
Yes, that's so important. I think one of the major aspects of doing this project has been to alert the world, especially to Americans whom the media have not informed accurately, about what's going on in Gaza itself, the fact that there's such extreme need. It's not a natural disaster. It's a very man-made disaster through Israel and through the policies that the U.S. has taken as a result of Israel's lobbying. I think it's very important that part of what you've done is make the world aware of what it's like in Gaza.
I don't think that when we did this, we ever thought that we would make the impact that we have made, certainly 4 years later from when we started. We just wanted a very simple initiative, something that would be able to help the people in Gaza. And the 5 of us who started this thought Israel has an Achilles heel. And the Achilles heel is that they say that Gaza is no longer occupied. Therefore, if Gaza is no longer occupied, then we have every right to sail from international waters into the waters of Gaza and go and visit the people of Gaza. And that was our very, very simple premise. Israel still scrambles trying to figure out how to tell the world that they have the right to illegally blockade Gaza, yet not admit that they are occupying Gaza.
That's made that so blatant, because before that is the terminology Israel was using, still tries to use, that it, quote, disengaged from Gaza, it's no longer in charge. So it made it very obvious when the boats came through, when Israel then did end up stopping them, basically kidnapping people on board. It certainly changed that image that Israel somehow had actually disengaged and allowed Gaza to be free. So it did have that effect, I think, quite powerfully compared to what the terminology and was before your voyages. Now, going back to when you had that idea first 4 years ago and then spent 2 years trying to do it, can you describe for people what that entailed, some of the obstacles? I mean, what an enormous project to try to even get the money for boats that can take a journey of that distance is pretty significant.
It was a huge project. And again, I think that we were so naive and so determined and optimistic that we didn't realize. Had we realized how difficult it was going to be, I'm not sure we would have done it. We had a friend who was in Australia named Michael Shake, and he said, I think it would be a great idea to sail a boat from New York to Gaza, and, we will go down the coastline of Europe, we'll stop in places, we'll have press releases. The six of us thought, wow, that's a great idea. Now, out of the six of us, really, most of us were women. Paul LaRudy was the one man. All the rest of us were women. And we kind of thought, well, why not? Of course we can do this. So I asked a friend of mine whose name was Riyad Hamad, who was in Austin, Texas, whether or not he could help us find a boat. And Riyad was one of these people that if you asked him to find a bicycle, he would find 100. He was just an amazing man who knew how to wheel and deal and said, of course we'll find a boat. So we raised around $75,000, $80,000. He raised another $25,000. And I believe it was in February of 2008, he said, I found a boat. I'm going to put a down payment on the boat. Could I have $25,000? So he took the 25, his and ours, and was on his way to, we found out later, Turkey to find this boat when the IRS and the FBI crashed into his apartment and investigated him and took all of the money, took all of the paperwork, took all of the information. And for anybody who has followed the story of Riyad Hamad, people know that he committed suicide 2 months later. That was in April of 2008. So we are now, as the Free Gaza movement, left with no money, no boat, and no shining star, because that's really what Riyad was.
That's right, and such a deeply tragic event. I remember Riyad, of course, also very well. Truly compassionate, decent human being, a sense of humor, somebody who is dedicated to alleviating misery, to helping children. Clearly being driven to suicide by the FBI attack on him was just so deeply tragic that in addition to all of the money being taken, would be a major blow. I know that was, must have been very difficult.
We had said we were going to go in May of 2008. Obviously, we couldn't do that. And then we were determined we were going to go in 2008. And we scrambled and we put out pleas and we said we have got to raise $250,000. I think that's what we were trying to raise originally. And people stood up. I think what people need to clearly understand is this is really a grassroots movement. This is a movement of civil society who are saying we are not going to allow governments to turn away. And we've had donations that have been as small as $1.75, and then, of course, our largest donation was from the Perdana Global Fund in Malaysia for 300,000 euros. So it has been remarkable that we were able to go. We found 2 old fishing boats in Greece, which I think in the long run was quite appropriate. They had nothing on them. They had no sails. They had only a single motor. They had no wheelhouse. We had to take another $150,000 to get them ready to go. And we were determined that we were going to go in July and August or August of 2008. And we did.
It's an amazing story. 2 boats that are barely ready to go to sea. That would be quite a challenge.
I remember
having
our first
been
mate
somebody who's been around boats.
Yeah, our first mate looked at the boats. We'd finally found a first mate who knew something about boats, and he looked at us and he goes, okay, these are floating shipwrecks. And then we went, yeah, I know, but they'll get us to Gaza.
That's a little scary. These are floating shipwrecks, and you're supposed to somehow get them ready to go to Gaza.
And they went.
And they did. Hello, welcome back. I'm your host today, Allison Weir, and with me is Greta Berlin, one of the founders of the Free Gaza movement and one of the initiators of the entire Break the Siege in Gaza movement that we've seen escalating in recent years. A number of people after Greta and a handful of other people began their efforts to get the first boat to go in and break the siege directly, a grassroots movement of citizens from all over the world. Since they first began this movement, a number of other people have joined it and have created their own marches and their own flotillas, etc. George Galloway is well known, the former member of Parliament from Britain who has led some convoys into Gaza. But, of course, they came after Greta and her handful, mostly of women, and Paul LaRuti, who put this together. So I wonder, Greta, can you give us the names of those few other people that were part of this right from the beginning, or are they people that really want to stay out of the public eye?
Oh, no. I think they're very proud of it. Mary Hughes Thompson, who comes from Los Angeles, was one of the original ones. Bella Locke is in London. Eliza Earnshire is in London. She was another one. And then there was, as you said, Paul, and there was me, and Darlene and Donna Wallach, who were the twins out of the Bay Area, and Huwaida Arif, who came on board a couple of months later, Ramzi Kaisia. I think within maybe 2 to 3 months, we had 50 people who are the core people. Most of us had already been with the ISM. We'd already been with the International Solidarity Movement. Many of us had not been able to get back into the West Bank. So we were already veterans of working with the Palestinians and standing up for justice for the Palestinians. I think the other thing people need to realize is there's a feeling that when this flotilla was attacked, that it was the first time or maybe the second time that boats were sent to Gaza. This was our 9th voyage. We got in successfully 5 times. It was only after Operation Cast Lead and the massacres during Operation Cast Lead that they began to stop us. But all through 2008, in August, October, November, twice in December, our small little boat, we ended up buying a yacht after the very first 2 trips, was taking people in to bear witness and then bringing Palestinians out, mostly students who are not allowed out to go to universities. So when Israel says that this is a blockade and they have the right to do this, they don't. We got in successfully 5 times.
When this last tragic flotilla did get some media attention, much of it inaccurate and with the usual Israeli spin, but I think many people didn't know that this was, as you say, this was the 9th voyage after a number of successful voyages, both not only breaking the siege, not only getting things into Gaza, but allowing people to leave the prison of Gaza. I remember, wasn't there one young boy with medical needs who was not allowed out to get medical treatment? And I believe that you took him with you on your boat when you left Gaza?
Yes, his name is Saeed, and he's actually in Cyprus now, and his entire leg was gone. It was shot off by a mortar. And we had taken him and his dad to Cyprus. He got treatment in Greece. He now has a prosthetic leg. He is in university in Cyprus. And those small little victories, I know they're only one at a time, but then civil society is only one person at a time as well. So we were quite pleased with that, and we were quite pleased that we would be able to take some of the Fulbright scholars and some of the others, for example, we took them out. What's happened with the flotilla is Israel spins the story and says, if you have humanitarian goods, you can deliver them to us, and we will deliver them to Gaza. This is not about delivering anything. This is about breaking Israel's illegal blockade of 1.5 million people. They are the only territory in the world that has no right to its own water or its own shores. We take humanitarian supplies in because we can, but that's not our objective. Our objective is to break Israel's illegal blockade.
I don't think Americans, Californians would like the idea that, say, China or France or anywhere blocked off the coast of California and didn't let people leave or come in, and in fact blocked the entire boundaries of California or the entire boundaries of the United States, keeping us prisoner, controlling who comes in and goes out of our country. I don't think anybody would like that, and Palestinians don't. So in addition to the extreme, almost catastrophic conditions that a number of humanitarian agencies have been documenting for several years, the whole freedom of movement is a major issue that most people are unaware of, and that I think your project helped make people aware of and helped say, no, this is wrong. The whole basic core issue here is wrong and something that needs to be addressed by the world community, and that's what you all did.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that there have been other initiatives, and that's true. Now, there have been no other sea initiatives because they're usually under the umbrella of the Free Gaza movement. But Viva Palestina went by land, for example. There have been other boats. Everybody's probably read about the Libyan boat and the Algerian boat. They're not doing the same thing that we are doing. Our purpose is to break Israel's illegal siege. The other initiatives are to bring to the attention of the world that you cannot slowly starve 1.5 million people into submission. And so we're thrilled. The Gaza Freedom March was another one that was last December, at the end of December. Those are wonderful initiatives because it keeps Gaza and Palestine, not just Gaza, but all of Palestine, on the front page. And that's one of the things we're trying to do. We're trying to say that civil society has an obligation to do this. I come out of the 60s. I come out of the civil rights movement. I come out of the women's rights movement. You know, we didn't go down to Alabama to have lunch. We went down to Alabama to make sure that we could break the Southern attitude towards African Americans and give them the right to their civil rights and their human rights. And we're trying to do the same thing.
It's a great analogy. It's sort of as though people went to a lunch counter in Alabama. They said, well, don't worry, we'll just bring the food out to you in the corner.
Exactly. And that is what they said.
Yeah.
You can eat in the parking lot. And went,
that's
wait
right.
a minute, we're not eating in the parking lot.
That's
We're
right.
here to sit down and have lunch and demand that you serve people. We're doing the same thing. Don't tell us that you can take humanitarian supplies to Ashdod. And incidentally, that's what happened to the cargo ships this time. The Israelis have nothing in place in Ashdod to deliver anything. It's 6 weeks later, and they are finally delivering the supplies. All of those supplies, incidentally, that were on the list of supplies that were not allowed into Gaza. So when Israel says you can take them to Ashdod, you can deliver them and we'll take them, that's another one of their lies that they like to spin that Americans pay attention to and shouldn't.
That's right. I think it's important to deconstruct that one because, as I understand it, it's very questionable whether and when they will deliver the humanitarian supplies that they say that they will do. Whether all of those ever do make it into Gaza is unclear to me. I'm not sure that they have. We'll get to more of your efforts to get boats into Gaza. I know that at least one of those boats was hijacked by the Israeli military on the high seas. This would be an act of piracy if it were civilians, but when it's an act by a military, that's an act of war. So these are significant actions that are happening, and as I understand it, I think Israel still holds a number of these boats and ships.
They hold all of them. Yes, they hold all of them.
$1 million worth of
Well, yeah, more than that. I mean, look, they destroyed $1 million worth of equipment. Nobody has gotten their luggage back. Nobody has gotten their cameras back or their tapes or their computers. Nobody has gotten anything back. Nobody has gotten their money back. I know of a young man in Canada who was going to go and stay in Gaza and teach. He took 4,000 Canadian dollars with him, and he never got it back. They've taken millions of dollars. They've taken millions of dollars worth of equipment and the boats. All 7 boats, including our Spirit of Humanity that was hijacked last summer, are all sitting in the ports in Israel right now.
That's a pretty hefty theft that we're talking about. That's a lot of money and goods to have been stolen. As you say, I mean, one person, $4,000. This is hard to justify how they can just take somebody's private money. But, of course, Israel doesn't have to justify it because usually the media doesn't tell about it.
And it's funny because you're in the United States, and, of course, I'm here in France now, and the Europeans clearly know what's happening. It's much easier to live here and to hear what they say. They were outraged over what happened, where Americans, it's like Americans live in a vast hole that the Israeli lobby has dug for them, and they're willing to believe anything rather than to do any work themselves. But you know what? The news is all there. They just simply have to go and look for it and listen to programs like yours.
That's right. Well, fortunately, as I'm sure you're aware, more and more people are starting to do that. Many people think they're doing a good job. They are trying to listen to the media. They're trying to read the newspapers that are considered credible news sources. They listen to National Public Radio. So the problem, as you and I both know, is that even the people that in our busy lives trying to make a living, raise children, go to school, many of the people that are still trying to take the time to become well-informed are not succeeding when they access the traditional sources of the American media, both the liberal and the conservative. And what's happening is many are going beyond those to the Internet, to programs like ours, to alternative media, and are starting to get the facts. We're back with Greta on the line from France. Describe for our listeners a little bit what that first voyage was like heading for Gaza.
Well, as I said, they were very small fishing boats. They were only supposed to take between 11 and 13 per boat. I was on the Free Gaza, which was the first boat that got into Gaza in 41 years with internationals, and we had 26 on board the boat. There was no place to sleep. Most of us were standing. We were all seasick. Israel had blocked our communications. They had blocked our phones. They had blocked satellite communications. They had blocked our GPS. They had threatened the entire 2 weeks before we left that they were going to sink the boats. I was in charge of the media. I would get phone calls saying, do you know how to swim? Lauren Booth, who is Sherry Blair's sister, got phone calls threatening that if she went, somebody would come and they would kill her children. So we are undergoing threats. We're not sure where the boats are because we wouldn't let anybody know. When we get on board, it was a small set of boats, so it was 33 hours. People are seasick. They're throwing up over the side. We don't know where anybody is. It's the middle of the night. We had wonderful, wonderful captains. They literally guided us through the sea with pieces of paper and a compass, because what Israel was trying to do, and they continue to try to do this with all of our trips, is to push us into Israeli waters. If you look at the map, we have to go past Israel in order to get to Gaza. Now, we pass Israel at about 70 miles out, clearly in international waters. But if they stop our guidance systems, what they were going to try to do is push us into the water so they could arrest us. It never happened. I think one of the reasons they attacked us both last year and this year in international waters is because they knew that. They could not push us into their territorial waters.
Such a dramatic story. I wonder when Hollywood is going to make a movie of it. Of course, I'm not holding my breath for that to happen, but maybe the French film industry or someone else, because it would be truly an amazing and dramatic movie. We have some callers who would like to ask their questions, so I'll start with John from Arlington, Virginia. John?
Is there any good, strong effort within the American Jewish community to start to speak out like you're doing to counter the Israeli lobby in the United States?
Greta?
Yeah, it's a great question, John. It really is. One thing I wanted to tell everybody who's listening is that when the flotilla got attacked, Israel had its little talking heads out there, Mark Regev and all of the little... They spent millions and millions of dollars trying to spin the story. Countering those stories were 4 women over the age of 65. The oldest was 85, in the office in Cyprus. And we were doing all of the media work for 4 days. None of us ever slept. We were 65, 69, 76, and 85. 2 of those women are Jewish. Many of the Jewish people who work with us, men and women, are saying, look, this is not being done in my name. This is not what I signed on to. Israel is not about my values. Israel is a colonial white colony in the middle of an Arab world, and this is not what I needed, and this is not what I want. So yes, we have many Jewish supporters, everyone from B'Tselem to Tikkun Olam in the United States. I believe that it's getting more and more obvious to what somebody called righteous Jews that this is not what they want.
Sadly, all of the mainstream Jewish organizations, the ADL, AIPAC, the presidents of major Jewish organizations, all of them seem to continue to support Israel, right or wrong, knee-jerk support for some of Israel's most outrageous actions. But there are dissenting organizations, growing numbers of them, and with growing numbers of members that are opposing those mainstream organizations. So I think that is a movement that has been around for very long. It's been very small for most years, but now it's growing larger and larger and becoming significant. Next, we'll take a caller from Akron, Ohio. Gloria.
First of all, I was on the trip with CNI, and I'm still giving lectures using some of your material, Allison.
Oh, wonderful.
In my talk. I hand out contacts of Jewish peace people, and I'm also adding to my contacts Reporters Without Borders, Israel, and so they can see how the press is controlled. Since your guest is from France, I wondered if it would be useful to compare the siege of Gaza with Oradour. Remember the French village that Hitler locked up in a siege because he was looking for terrorists. He wouldn't let people in or out and then bombed it and set it on fire. If the next ship could be named in memory of Oradour and Gaza, in other words, associate the siege of Gaza with the siege of Oradour.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your call. Greta, would you like to address it?
Yeah, it's a great idea. In fact, that is exactly what we were doing, not Oradora necessarily. I am an American, by the way. I've just supplanted myself from the United States into France because I can't bear watching what's happening in the United States, but I still come back all the time. One of the things that we have done after this last flotilla is to say we are going to underwrite, as a Free Gaza movement, the initiatives of various countries. And I'm sure many people listening know the U.S. boat to Gaza, which is being called the Audacity of Hope. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to put it on the front page so that they have to say it. There's a UK initiative. It's called the Tom Herndl because, like Rachel Corrie, he was murdered by the Israelis. They are going to probably put an initiative together in Poland, and they're going to call it the Warsaw Wall. So it's exactly what we're trying to do. We're getting clever enough now to say it's not just about sailing a boat. It's about making people pay attention and making people remember history.
That's wonderful because it is so similar to Warsaw. I'm sure you recall a few years ago it came out in the Israeli media that the Israeli military was studying the Nazi tactics in Warsaw to use those same tactics against the ghettos it's created in the West Bank and in Gaza. So appropriate that there will be a boat with that name. I personally hope to be on board the Audacity of Hope this time.
I hope so.
Wanting to be on one of these boats all along, and as you know, family
you have.
weddings and things and wonderful births of grandchildren have prevented me from taking part, but I hope this next one that I will be on board, the Audacity of Hope, coming from the United States. We have another caller from New York, James.
Thank you very much for what you've said, and I totally agree with your comments that it's only a movement by civil society that will change Israel. Certainly, the U.S. government is totally impotent to do anything. That's why I'm so happy to see that you now have this Audacity of Hope. Greta, I just wanted to ask you, are you receiving any flack or any signs from the U.S. government or AIPAC or others here who are already trying to kill that or discourage that boat?
They put out an article saying that Rashid Khalidi was one of the people who endorsed the Audacity of Hope. How dare one of Obama's friends do that? And Khalidi's comment was, well, if Obama just did something about Gaza and the occupied territories, we wouldn't have to be sailing an Audacity of Hope because it would already be resolved. And I think that that's exactly what we're trying to say. Will we get flack? We always get flack. It doesn't make any difference what country it's going to be. It doesn't make any difference when we go. I know that the House of Representatives took my name in vain and said, how dare Greta Berlin say that this initiative was about breaking the blockade of Gaza. Well, that's because that's what it is. It's about breaking the blockade.
Welcome back. This is Jerusalem Calling with Allison Weir. I'm your host today, and with us is Greta Berlin. Greta, I think we were just talking about the House of Representatives. You said had said your name and had questioned what you were doing. Would you like to continue on that a little bit more?
It was the occupied members from New York. They were all in a tizzy because they were trying to spin the story the Israeli way, and they were saying that those of us who were on the flotilla should be arrested. We shouldn't be let back into the United States. How dare Greta Berlin say that they were going to break Israel's blockade of Gaza? It's a military blockade. But they seem to always leave the word illegal out of their terminology. They can't seem to get that out of their mouth. And the reality of it is that all international bodies are saying that Israel's blockade is illegal, is collective punishment against a civilian population. The only illegal entity off the shores of Gaza is Israel, and that's why we're going to continue to keep going.
We have people in Congress that are, unfortunately, always push the Israeli line, and the media that's very willing to take it. So I'm glad to have opportunities to try to get the actual facts out to our listeners. Well, I guess there are two flotillas I'd especially like you to discuss. One is the times that the Israeli Navy actually rammed one of your ships. I believe that one had a former congresswoman on board, and I believe Marian McGuire, an Irish Nobel Peace Laureate, has been on board some of your ships as well. Could you describe some of those incidents?
Mairead got in on the second trip, and that was in October of 2008. In December of 2008, when Operation Cast Lead started, We had a small yacht. We'd had a number of donors step up and say, you know what, you cannot go back in these pathetic-looking boats. It's amazing that they even managed to get across the sea. So we're going to collect enough money that you can buy a yacht. And we did. We called it the Dignity. And in the middle of the night, again, in international waters, Carl Penhall was on board. He's with CNN. And Cynthia McKinney was on board, and they rammed the boat 3 times. Now, Israel's story is that somehow we bumped into each other. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you read the accurate description of what happened, they rammed us 3 times. You don't bump into a yacht with a warship in the middle of the night 3 times. Mm-hmm. They were trying to sink us. Personally, I think that they thought the boat was a fiberglass boat, and it wasn't. It was a fiberglass, wooden-coated fiberglass, and it didn't go down. Otherwise, it would have gone down instantly. We had a great captain. We had a crew that was very calm. Everybody put on their life jackets, and it limped into Lebanon, but it was never the same. It sank in a bad sea several months later. We were never really able to fix it again.
I can understand how terrifying that was for the people on board.
And it's the middle of the night. And,
right.
and all of your satellite equipment is out. All of your communications equipment is out. They blocked everything, and all you see are these huge lights that are coming down on the top, because, of course, an Israeli warship is much bigger than our small yacht, and they're ramming you on the left-hand side. Not once, but they pull back and they ram you 2 more times, thinking that they're going to be able to sink you. They did the same kind of thing in international waters again last year, and Mairead was on that. And so both the Mairead and Cynthia were on that boat again last year. It was July of 2009, and they simply hijacked the boat. They got on. There were 15 or 20 Israelis all dressed in masks. The irony of it was those men that got on board, those Israelis, it was so rough by then that they were busy throwing up over the side. They were
really? I hadn't heard that part.
Yeah, well, no, of course. They're busy throwing up. So much for the Israeli vaunted military might as they throw up over the sides. One of our crew members was saying he was hanging on to one of them as he was busy throwing up over the side of the boat. So I think that we felt when this flotilla went out that we had gotten in 5 times. We had been stopped 3 times. Yes, we were stopped violently twice. But it was because they either rammed us or they boarded us. I don't think anybody on that flotilla thought that they would murder us.
That was a major escalation.
Israel is never held accountable. I mean, nobody ever stops Israel. We give them $7 million a day, we Americans, to go ahead and do this. If it doesn't stop when you ram a boat, if it doesn't stop when you board a boat, if it doesn't stop them when you hijack a boat, their next obvious step is to get on board and murder 9 people.
Not too long ago, the Washington Post had an article, I think about the time of the most recent flotilla, of course. And in it, they said that previous efforts there'd been really few problems with them. And I contacted the foreign desk and the ombudsman numerous times saying, wait a minute, there were problems. Ships were rammed and almost sank. Amazingly, eventually they actually did run a correction. But it was only through dozens of phone calls and emails that they ran that correction. Their ombudsperson at one point in their office told me to stop bothering her with this. So it's astounding what they continue to get away with.
And I think that that's what is working, though, Allison. I think that what's happening in the United States is people are paying attention, as you said. I mean, you and I remember when nobody paid any attention to us at all when we tried to talk about what was happening with the Palestinians. There was a superb article by Roger Cohen in the New York Times last week about the Forgotten American, the young 19-year-old man that was murdered. And that never would have happened. Not even 3 years ago would that have gotten into a mainstream press. I think that Israel knows this. I think that they are frantic. I think that if, for those of us who were involved with the apartheid movement in South Africa, that the worst time of apartheid in South Africa was the 3 years before it fell. I think this is the same kind of situation. It's just that how many Israelis and Palestinians are going to suffer, and those of us who care about them both, before this finally falls apart, I think that the same thing will happen to Israel that happened in South Africa. You will have a one-state, national, bicultural state. There isn't any other solution.
I think you're right. I think that's coming. That's the move that's there. I certainly Roger Cohen was not writing articles like that until your efforts and this international effort and so many people in the United States, around the country, have started to get it out in all the ways that we can, through the Internet, through alternative radio and television, and through speeches around the country. Finally, Roger Cohen at the New York Times writes something that should have been written decades ago, but we're seeing these articles now appear. And the Free Gaza movement has played a major role in that and is continuing to. These next ships will be probably extremely significant and another historic event. And thank you, Greta, so much for organizing these. We have a few seconds left. If you have any last comment that you'd like to tell our listeners, if there's anything about the coming flotilla you'd like to announce, this is your chance.
We hope to go in the fall. We're looking for 9 to 12 boats from around the world, certainly from Europe and the United States. Please go to our website. It's freegaza.org. Although we are helping initiatives like the U.S. initiative, we all need the money.
Thanks very much.
We all need the money.
Thanks very much.
We all need the money.